Hey patrons, it's Zulz. Okay, now that we're moving into chapter 11, I thought I would make a little video talking about chapter 9 and chapter 10, and in particular the art style I used for these chapters, which was a departure from how I drew the previous chapters. So for all of the chapters before chapter 9, I used what I'll call line art style A. Now, line art style A is pressure sensitive. So when I draw, the width of the line changes based on how hard I press my pen down. But starting in chapter 9, I went with line art style B. For line art style B, I used a fixed width brush. So no matter how hard I press my pen down or how lightly I drag it across my tablet, it's the same width no matter what. Line art style A, I'm just drawing a few more things in line art style A and B to kind of show how drawing or writing the same things kind of end up with a different feel. Even though I'm not being totally consistent with how I'm writing them. You can still tell there's a big difference. Woo! So here's the page with line art style A. This is actually a panel I'm really proud of and really like, and I wanted to showcase it. So if you zoom in and look closely, you can see that some areas of Amber's hair have thick outlines, while other areas of her hair have thinner outlines. And this gives the art a more dynamic look. It looks pretty good. Now with line art style B, you have this fixed width line art throughout the whole page. When you zoom in, you can tell basically all the lines are the same width. This doesn't really give much of a dynamic look, but I actually really like this style because it gives the panels kind of a crafted look. They're a little more artificial, but cartoons are artificial looking. They're not realism. So I liked it, and I rolled with it for chapter 9 and 10. But the big reason why I wanted to switch to line art style B was actually speed. Here we have two panels. The panel on the left is from chapter 8 with line art style A, and the panel on the right is from chapter 10 with line art style B. What I want you to notice is that the characters are all roughly the same size, especially Amber. Amber's head is like almost exactly the same size in both panels, but the Amber on the right is much less detailed. Now, when I'm using line art style B, my brush can't really get small enough to draw the details you see in this page, so I'm forced to kind of simplify my style and draw with less detailed strokes. So this actually helps me to complete the panel quicker. You can tell just by looking how much more detail I put into the panel on the left. There's just a huge difference. Now, the interesting thing is, when you look at the panels of the size they appear when they're uploaded, of course I draw pages in a much larger size than what you see because I scale them down afterward. There's still a pretty big difference in the amount of detail you see, but it's not as glaring as you would think. This chapter 10 page might feel like it cuts corners a little bit more, but it still works. It still reads like a good page. It still serves its purpose. Whereas the page on the left does look a lot better, but is it worth all that extra time I spent on this one little panel that's actually kind of small in comparison to the entire page? In my opinion, no, because I gotta go fast. But to my surprise, switching to this uniform width line art style in chapter 9 and 10 didn't actually make me produce pages any faster. I was actually kind of going slower than I'd been going, which was pretty bad. So it took me a while, first, to realize that I was going slower, and second of all, to realize why I was going slower. So when I draw, I don't actually draw perfect strokes 100% of the time. I actually undo a lot of what I'm doing while I'm drawing. It actually takes me a few tries to get my lines down, usually. So when I draw, there's a lot of fiddling around with each line, trying to get it in exactly the right place, at exactly the right angle. When I draw like this, I do something that I'll call line art shaving, and it's when I draw a line and then it's not quite right, so I kind of redirect it in a more correct fashion. But when I do that, I kind of shave away the bits that are wrong, and it's almost akin to sculpting more than drawing at that point. But it works, and eventually you get line art that looks pretty good, and more importantly, the lines are in the correct places. And that's really helpful when you don't put them in the correct places right from the get-go every time, like me. So with line art style A, when I do line shaving, it's pretty seamless. It doesn't create many problems for me, because when I shave the lines down, if they end up smaller than the surrounding lines, or thinner, then there's not really that big a problem, because the lines are all different sizes anyway. But when I use line art style B and I try to line shave, there's a lot more pressure to shave it to the exact width of every other line, because I want things to look uniform and consistent. And if 98% of the lines on a page are a certain width, but then you have this line that I, fiddled with and shaved and tried to sculpt a little more than the others, and it's a lot wider than the others or a lot thinner than the others, then it'll look bad. So it's a lot easier to draw quickly with line art style A and kind of just live in the moment and move on without worrying too much about the width of the lines, because they're all going to be different anyway. When you use line art style B and try to go fast, when you zoom out and look at the finished product, there's a sense of sloppiness to it, more so than in line art style A. At least that's what I think. So when I draw with line art style B, and I shave, which is often my lines, of course, I spend a lot more time doing that. And that's what was creating the extra time in production that I didn't realize would happen. And it ended up making it so that Chapter 9 and Chapter 10 took a lot longer to draw than I anticipated when I switched the style with the intention in the first place of going faster, and that didn't happen. So for Chapter 11, I'm going back to line art style A, and hopefully I'll be able to make pages fast again. But as I move back to my old line art style, I don't want to forget the lessons I learned from line art style B, which is, when you're drawing real small details in the background or really small people that aren't going to end up that big on the final page, don't sweat the details, kind of simplify it. So hopefully, even though I'm going back to line art style A, I'll still keep in mind the advantages of line art style B and not get too detailed when they don't need to. So that was the best way I could explain what was going on with Chapter 9 and Chapter 10. I hope everybody enjoyed them anyway. I certainly did. I liked how a lot of the panels turned out, even though, it was different style. And who knows, maybe one day I might go back to line art style B because I really like it. Thank you so much for supporting me on Patreon. And I look forward to telling you about stuff in the next video, if I can think of another topic soon.